Okay. Hi. Welcome to Module 2, where we're talking about land, air, and water. Indigenous knowing is that all things are connected. The land, air, and water should never be for sale. They are something that everyone should share, and that is the belief. The idea of owning property doesn't really align with traditional indigenous beliefs. We are a part of the land, and we are here for a short time, borrowing all that the Mother Earth, has to provide us. This concept that everything is connected, including land, air, water, and that we each impact the other. All life forms are connected. All life forms are related. So there's this most indigenous communities, not all, have this idea, this concept that all things are related. All life forms. That includes the insects, what we call the creepy crawlers, the birds, or otherwise known as the winged, the four-legged animals, like dogs and cats and donkeys, and the two-legged beings, which would be us. We are all related to each other. In Mi'kmaq, or Mi'kmaq, the expression is umsit nogama, and that means all my relations. We are all related. And in Lakota, it is mitakwiyoi asan. As you go through this module, I want you to think about how all things are related, how you are related to everything that surrounds you. Think about the importance of this understanding when working in the helping field. Everything is connected. My mother, not my biological mother, but a mother, in indigenous culture, we have many mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and fathers and nieces and nephews and relatives. This not necessarily just by blood, right? So based on your ages, you might be considered a brother or sister to me, or a niece or nephew. If we were really close, you might be considered a daughter or son. Anyway, my mother taught me about, quote unquote, the World Wide Web. So the native meaning of the World Wide Web, and she explains this as Iktomi, which is the spider in Lakota. Iktomi builds a giant web, and in that web that Iktomi builds, you can see the intersections and connections. And the Iktomi, the spider, gets the web out as far as they can go. And you ever see a really clear spider web in an early morning and how big they can be? And so if you picture the earth as being this giant World Wide Web with all of these intersections and connections, that we are all connected. And that's how our world is. That's the world view, that everything is connected. We have to, in that, we have to look at how our actions and attitudes impact others. So I'm often given feedback about my really calm demeanor and how helpful that is to people who are in crisis or having a really difficult time. I think about, every day I think about the barista at Starbucks impacts me when I go there. And I make a conscious choice of which one I go to. So my experience has been that if I go to the one on campus, they're not usually friendly. If I go to the one at Kroger's, they rarely make my drink correctly. But when I go to the one across from campus, they know my name. They say good morning. They smile. And they tell me to have a great day. And they always get my drink right. And so I have this connection with this group of people that that I'm very conscious of. When I think of the connections with land, air, and water, there are so many examples of how they impact each other and us. So think about what happens to communities with poor air quality or contaminated water. People having to go out to buy water. And water shouldn't have to be for sale. I think about the Dakota Access Pipeline and how leaks of oil in the water will impact millions of people. I think about the tar sand fires in Canada last summer and the wildfires in California and how they impact the communities and the ripple effect that it has throughout the world. Those are just a couple of examples. When you read about the Winona, when you read the section that I have posted for Winona LaDuke, she talks about the Dakota Access Pipeline. Winona LaDuke is an environmental activist. She's an Anishinaabe woman from the White Earth Reservation in Upper Minnesota. I never met Winona, but her father, Sun Bear, crossed many years ago. And Sun Bear, along with a man named Wallace Black Elk, were teachers. They taught about ceremony in indigenous ways. They did receive some backlash because in addition to teaching natives about ceremonies, they also taught non-natives and they welcomed non-natives into ceremonies, which traditionalists, extreme traditionalists, have a difficult time with or don't agree with that. So those teachers, actually Sun Bear was a teacher of Stoneman, my husband Terry's teacher. In fact, we often participate in a sweat lodge ceremony with this man, Scott, who apprenticed with Sun Bear, and Sun Bear passed that ceremony on to him. And then this man, Scott, passed the ceremony on to the tradition and the ceremony on to my husband, Stoneman, so that he would be able to pour water in a sweat lodge. So there's some lineage, there's some connection that I have to Winona LaDuke. And just kind of an aside, if you ever have the opportunity to participate in a sweat lodge or other type of ceremony, a couple of important things to know. The person facilitating the ceremony should have been given permission by an elder or teacher to facilitate it. You don't just go to a sweat lodge or a ceremony and see one or two times and then go off and do it on your own. That's really unacceptable. It's kind of like having to go through college and getting your bachelor's degree or your master's degree. It has to be passed down to you. You have to spend time earning that right to do that. And then the second thing that's really important to remember or to know is that if you go to any ceremony, traditionally there is never a charge for ceremony. So if someone is charging you to participate in a sacred ceremony like a sweat lodge, they're not doing it in an honorable way. Anyway, back to Winona LaDuke. So she says, power is in the earth. It is your relationship to the earth. There's a website called Honor the Earth website, and it has a lot of great information about the work that she and her organization have been doing, environmental action work. She was instrumental in stopping Enbridge from putting the pipeline through the White Earth Reservation. But then later was furious when she found out that they rerouted it and set their sights in South Dakota, where the pipeline is now going through. In her book, she talks about many environmental issues. And one section, she talks about the auction of the sacred. So I'm going to share, I'm going to read a couple of pages from the book. You also have a link to a chapter from the book. But this section is called The Auction of the Sacred. As the wind breathes out of Wind Cave, I am reminded of the creation of humans and my own small place in this magnificent world. Wind Cave National Park in the Black Hills is named for the cave itself, called Washon Niam, the breathing hole of Mother Earth, by the Lakota people. In the Lakota creation story, it is from here that they emerged to this world. It is a complex cave system. According to scientists, we may only have a sense of 5% of the cave's volume and breadth, and likely even less of its power. Some might call this the known unknown. Most indigenous people would understand it as the great mystery, that which is much larger than our own anthropocentric understanding of the world, reflecting the understanding that, indeed, there is more than one world surrounding people. So it is that in 2012, a time of change and transformation signaled in an American election year and predicted in the Mayan calendar, we find the smallness and the greatness of humans in the much larger world around us coming face to face in the Black Hills, a most sacred place, Pesla, in the center of the Lakota universe, came up for sale, and values and worldviews clashed. To the Lakota, Pesla to the Lakota is center of the heart of everything that is. One of a small number of highly revered and geographically, cosmologically integral places on the entire planet, according to Lakota scholar Chase Iron Eyes. It is the place where Morning Star manifested as a meteor, fell to the earth to help the Lakota by killing a great bird that had taken the lives of 7 women. Morning Star's descent having created the wide open, uncharacteristic bald spot in the middle of the forested Black Hills. The Morning Star placed the spirits of those 7 women in the sky as the constellation Pleiades, or the 7 Sisters. On August 25th, 2012, the center of the heart of everything was to be placed on the auction block, destined to be diced into a set of 300-acre tracts proposed for ranchettes, while a possible road through the heart of what has been, until now, a relatively undesecrated sacred site. We didn't even know it was going to be sold, Deborah Whiteplume, an Oglala Lakota activist from Manderson, told me. We heard nothing about it until we saw the auction announcement. America is a country where private property is enshrined as a constitutional right, but the rights of nature and the natural world or of unborn generations are not. In the time of crashing ecosystems, and worlds, it may be worth not making a commodity out of all that is revered. A 2005 editorial in the generally very conservative Rapid City Journal points out that protecting Lakota sacred sites is of interest to all. Non-Indians have little to fear if familiar sites are designated as sacred. Visitors are still allowed at Bear Butte, Devil's Tower, and Rainbow Bridge, even though they are being managed as Indian sacred sites, and in fact, expanding non-Indians' knowledge and appreciation of the Indian lore surrounding such sites could lead to greater cultural understanding. With less than 2 weeks remaining before Pasla was to be auctioned off, word spread through the Lakota communities, 3 of which, all Lakota reservations, are in the economically poorest counties in the country. Through the use of Facebook, the internet, and the media, from the Huffington Post to the Seattle Times, the story of the Lakota people, their sacred site, and the proposed auction was repeated in whispers, and then in rallies and in outrage. Using the internet, the communities raised over $500,000, which was then matched by tribal money originating with Rosebud Sioux Tribe and other donations. The auction was canceled, and the Lakota people have begun to negotiate for the purchase of their sacred site. It is incredibly ironic, however, in many particular ways, particularly considering that the Pahasapa, the Black Hills, was never purchased from the Lakota, but illegally taken by the United States with the advent of gold mining. Though over $105 million was allocated for the Black Hills by Congress to pay Lakota people for the illegal taking, that money has never been accepted. Hence the irony. The people must buy back land they never considered owned by anyone else. As you know from reading Garrett and Pinchot in the introduction module, there are a range of assimilation levels with Indigenous people, all the way from strictly traditional folks to completely westernized and assimilated. Robin's article focuses on the use of technology to help with environmental justice issues. It is important to find a balance and to use both traditional methods and new methods. Last summer, Stoneman and I were at a Mi'kmaq powwow in Canada on Prince Edward Island. The chief was standing with a staff, and that a staff looks like an extra tall walking stick. On this staff there was an eagle feather. The eagle is the highest flying bird and flies closest to Creator. Eagle feathers are revered, and they're not given out or received lightly. Anyway, this chief had this staff with the eagle feather, and he was holding the staff in one hand, and in the other hand he was holding a cell phone. He commented on this. He said, although it felt strange, we, Indigenous people, must learn to walk in both worlds and use the gifts provided from each. There is a Mi'kmaq expression called two-eyed seeing, and what this means is that we need to use one eye to see with Indigenous knowledge and one eye to see with Western or dominant society knowledge, not making either right or wrong, but taking the strengths from each. So as you go through the required readings, I touched a bit here on the Leduc chapter and also Robin's article. And then there's a lot of information on the quiz, hint, from Talcott, Mackenzie, and McCoy's article. So you'll want to make sure you spend time looking that over and really getting an understanding of what colonization and decolonization means. And here's a list of the required videos. The climate change video is a really simple video to help you have an understanding, a basic understanding of what climate change means. And let's see, the Cherokee word for water is a film based on the Wilma Mankiller, who was a Cherokee chief in Oklahoma and who was instrumental in getting water into a Cherokee community in Oklahoma. Great film. And exploring who Wilma Mankiller is would be great. And it's important to remember that the Cherokee, because a lot of you mentioned having some Cherokee DNA. So the Cherokee originally from this area were forced to move during the Trail of Tears. Many refused to leave the area, and so there's still the Cherokee boundary here. But then there's the Cherokee reservation in Oklahoma. The Cherokee in this area are considered or called the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. And there's a couple of video clips of Winona LaDuke, and then Jutescat is a young indigenous activist, and so check out the clip on him and also explore other YouTube clips about him, as well as Earth Guardians, which is an organization that he created to help the environment. And then your assignments. So the discussion board is posted. Do not forget about the quiz, and the quizzes, remember, are based on the readings and some videos. Pretty sure this module, the quizzes are all based on the readings. Start thinking about your topics of interest. So what do you want to present on? What environmental issue do you want to present on? And think about if you want to do that solo or if you want to work with a partner. I'm flexible and I want you to be creative with this assignment.